So IGN just got their hands on The Outer Worlds 2, and they gave us a 10-minute tech demo. Let's get into it. All right, so the gameplay that they gave us seems heavily curated, but besides that, the game's actually looking pretty solid. It's a pretty big shift from the first game, at least in the way of visual style, and maybe it was just the planet they were on or something, or the mission that they were doing specifically, but I did notice that it didn't look exactly like the first Outer Worlds, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air. It immediately looks really polished, but again, this is heavily curated gameplay, so we're gonna have to wait until it comes out to really tell. But the UI looks really good, the weapons are looking cool. There's this really cool scythe thing that immediately stands out, and it looks like they dive a little bit more into that because of the icons that they use and some of the dialogue choices. It seems they could either be like gun focused or melee focused, depending on the kind of character that you want to build. But let's talk about the guns for a second, because they look surprisingly clean. Not just the design of them themselves in their funky Outer World style, but the actual firing and gunplay seemed really clean. It looked really satisfying to get these shots off, and I'm hoping that's just not something shown in the demo, but something we feel when we're actually playing the game. I'm not too sold on this N-ray detective vision thing that they used. Hopefully it's not overused. That trend got tired a few years ago, but if it's just for a few missions, I'm okay with that. But it just reminds me of the Arkham series or listening in The Last of Us or something like that, where it's just it got outplayed a while ago. And I don't really want to see that mechanic make a comeback, because as cool as it really just oversaturated the market with all the kind of games that did that. So I'm hoping we just see this for a couple missions here and there, or, some puzzles we need to solve, and it's not really heavily used. That being said, it was cool to see invisible enemies this way in the tech demo, but it's not something that I want to do all the time. Also, the companion AI, it seems pretty basic, like it was just pulled from the first game. It's really hard to tell because we didn't get a good look at it in the demo, but from what we did see, we're going to encounter the same kind of wonkiness from all companions in pretty much any game you see, where they'll just kind of get in your way some of the time. It didn't seem like a big deal, and it seems like the melee combat in this game has had a huge overhaul from the first, which is really exciting actually, but I'm hoping the companions don't get in the way as much like they did in the tech demo, for instance. It wasn't anything major, but it was just something I wanted to point out. And while we're talking about the companions, I wanted to talk about how cool it was to see like a villain-esque companion. It's something we haven't really seen a lot of lately because of how scared games are to really go on the opposite end or make you evil in any sort of way. Something that Baldur's Gate, I feel like, did really well, where you can kind of choose your evil route and it feels like you're doing a really good evil route, if that makes sense. And I'd also like to see more consequences for your actions, unlike what we saw in Avowed, where you could pretty much do anything you want and you're never treated or seen as a villain, at least not in any sort of long-standing way. And I know we're going to have a lot of comparisons to Avowed, and I know they were both developed by Obsidian, that's true, but they were worked on by two separate teams. And there might have been some overlap, I'm not sure, but I know the Avowed team was directed by Kerry Patel, and The Outer Worlds 2 is directed by Brandon Adler. So just because this game was developed by the same studio doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to receive the same quality product. Not to say that Avowed was bad in any way. It definitely had mixed reviews on Steam for a little while, and I think it's coming up positive now, but it just wasn't very memorable. There wasn't something extremely special about it or anything that made me want to dive back into that world. I just didn't really have a desire to do it. The combat was fun though, so it seems like if Obsidian does one thing well, it's to have an enjoyable combat loop. And I was kind of skeptical of Avowed at first, but that was kind of the one thing that kept bringing me back. Was like, wow, that combat does look really unique. It really feels fresh. It feels fun. And that's something that I also saw in this new Outer Worlds gameplay, but that wasn't the only thing I saw. And I feel like that's a key takeaway that's really important. I was also a really big fan of the first Outer Worlds. I played the heck out of it when it came out. Pretty sure I damn near 100%ed the game. While the game does have a lot of replayability, it didn't for me for some reason. But that wasn't necessarily a problem with the first one. After going through the game in a way that I found satisfying, I didn't really feel a need to go back. And some people might see an issue with that, but for me, it felt like a really fulfilling experience. I did have one game-breaking bug near the end of the game that I thought was really funny. You're supposed to talk to this guy, and it's supposed to be like the culmination of all of your choices and actions throughout the game, and he confronts you about it and has this big moral dilemma with all the things you chose, or at least so I heard. I never actually got to have the conversation with him because every time I entered his office and tried to talk to him, the game crashed. I was only able to beat the game because I opened the door without him seeing me, and shot him in the head, starting combat before actually talking to him. It was the only way I could figure out how to get around it without the game crashing. But it was a pretty big bug, and they actually wound up patching that the day after I beat the game. So there's that. Hopefully that's something we avoid in the sequel. But talking about the little demo they gave us again and the companions in it, not saying that I don't want companions just to be able to leave you at any point, but it's that kind of freedom that really emphasizes what these role-playing games are about and how you want to differentiate your characters in each playthrough. But getting back to the AI, it's not like it's any worse than anything we've ever seen. It's just not anything better. And like that's what I expect out of games moving forward in this AAA industry, especially when we're going to start charging $80 or $90 for games like Nintendo seems to be wanting to do. It's not an improvement in the AI so far. I mean, I don't know. We haven't seen everything yet, but from what I saw just in that short demo, which was very limited, mind you, we didn't see a ton of improvement in the AI. It was something that was really apparent in the beginning of the video. It was a really atmospheric scene where you're sneaking up on these, bad guys from across the bridge, you're being stealthy, you're pulling out your knife, and then you got your companion behind you saying,
"That's the range, Commander."
Just out in the open like they wouldn't hear it. Like, would it kill you to whisper? Games have done it. They know when you're crouching, they know when you're trying to be stealthy. I know it would be a lot more work on the voice actor for having to do whispered voices for every single line, but I mean, there's got to be some sort of workaround, right? But overall, they were being loud when you were trying to be sneaky. They were in your way when you were trying to shoot somebody. It's not like it's any worse than anything else you've ever played. It's just not better. Another thing I wanted to bring attention to is when the main character ends conversations with the NPC, they just say the same thing. They're sitting there like, oh, and I'll just be here in my puddle of blood.
Don't worry. I'll just be here in my deepening puddle of blood. Don't worry. I'll just be here in my deepening puddle of blood.
And that's fine, but if there was some randomness or any sort of variation on ending that conversation, it would make the world feel more alive. Like, these aren't just static NPCs in this world that's all yours. These are living, breathing creatures in this universe, and they kind of react as such. It was another minor thing that I just wanted to call attention to. Just like the AI, for instance, it's something that's not any worse than anything you've ever played. It's just not better, and moving forward, I really wanted to see these games take the initiative, make repetitive things like NPCs repeating their lines a thing of the past, and I don't think that's asking for too much. To wrap things up though, I really want to make sure that you guys know, like, I really liked the way that this was looking. The gunplay looked clean, the melee combat looked fun, the UI looked very crisp, I liked the dialogue options, everything looks pretty solid for this very tiny piece of gameplay that we saw. From what we've seen out of the systems that they've shown, they've really done a good job at bringing this from the first game into the second game. And if they continue to do that with things like the weapons, the spaceship, the companions, then I think we're in store for a really good game. Those are just my thoughts though. What did you guys think of the demo? Did it look good to you? Did you see something that I missed? Are you excited about certain things? Let me know in the comments. And that's pretty much all I got on the Outer Worlds 2 for now. I really wasn't expecting any sort of news until June and Xbox's conference, so it was a nice little treat to get something early. I'll keep you guys updated if we get anything else. Thanks, nerds. Follow for more.